all of the blessings in their own way, each is more beautiful and each is wonderful than the other. But let's start at the beginning, or at the end rather, where Dan, you had one plan, but God had another plan. And I do admit that I cannot stay angry and bitter on one hand side because Dan, you and Carol and Harry had set me up to be thrown out, as ugly as it was. But I cannot be angry and bitter about that and then focus on my music to do the concert on the day that you had thrown me out. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. I can't have it both ways, to be angry on one hand side and then to do my music on the day that I was thrown out, but then to be angry about it. That's like, as you often said, being double-minded, being torn up in two ways, so that doesn't work also. So, but it's absolutely miraculous, and it was amazing. And I thank God and I praise God that I was able to pull it off. 10 minutes, right? And all the challenges between the trips, between work, between this, between that, and doctors, and so on and so forth. And also being tired, that having two jobs. And then also that I was able to pull it off 10 minutes before midnight. Exactly 5 minutes, and I had posted a little note on the description where I had said God was with me, God was helping me, that God had another plan, that God had got me out of that situation and sent me to Colo University. And then also where that was 5 days after I was thrown out. I was thrown out on the 12th. I got the notes on the 17th. I played my first Colo exactly 2 weeks later, so that was my goal. Zlatni Borska Dvojnica, the silver wooden flute. That's what the song was called, the first Colo that I had played, and it was absolutely miraculous that because I hadn't played it literally since I was thrown out. There was a lot of PTSD and a lot of trauma there, but I had decided that I was going to do that, and where pretty much the way I had learned it, 2 weeks after you had thrown me out, the way I had learned it, that I was able to play it 33 years later. So what am I tripping about? What am I getting so upset about? And also that God had sent me to Walt Disney World. I'm serious. I got the ticket as proof. I got the videos. February 3rd to the 10th, 93, where both of my parents had sent me to, in other words, you were thrown out. It's like God's way of saying, Stefka, you can't have it both ways. You can't hold on to the meeting. You can't have the meeting, but then you want to go to Disney World, you want to play your Colo. So it was God's way of saying, this was the price tag. So it was like God's, and it had that was God's plan, that was God's will for me to be thrown out of the meeting. So that he had repositioned me in the darkest time, in the darkest setup, that God had, you had one plan, God had another plan. You had a plan to get me out of there. God had a plan to get me into Colo University and to send me to Disney World. And also where God had to get me out of the meetings with you, with Harry, with Frank, so that he can send Juan Martinez in my life, who had invited me, who had helped me so much, who had invited me back to the meeting. This is a true story. This is the true story. It's like, Stefka, you just got thrown out of the meeting. What are you going to do next with your life? Literally, I'm going to Disney World. And then also where God wanted to close that door on Frank and on Harry, on the whole bunch, that God did not even allow for me to get my driver's license until me and Frank had broken up. We never should have been connected in the first place. And then 9 months later, I had gotten my driver's license in August of 92. And then I got thrown out September 12th in 92. And then I got the Colo, the Serbian music, and then I got sent to Walt Disney World 4 months later after I had been thrown out. So that was all part of God's plan. So to accept it, so what am I tripping over? Anyhow, God's been good to me. And Dan and Carol, if it were up to you, I wouldn't be so thrilled about letting all the stuff go that had happened. But I do have to obey God, because it's not about you. It's about it's not about what you did. It's about what God did, where God was, how God had helped me in that situation. And you say, And the last words I remember, minutes before you had thrown me out, when you had said I was there to cause a scene. That's impossible, because I was ready to pass out when it was the prayer line. And we're going to talk about that before I hand that over to God. And that is a process. I am going to talk about the prayer line, because I do have a right to defend myself, because you say I was there to cause a scene. I couldn't even walk. I was almost ready to pass out. So I will address that in a moment, but I do have to take a break.